So I'd like to call to order the second meeting of our subcommittee on economics and infrastructure. And do I just call for a roll call, so to speak? Is that what I'm moving to confirm who's here?
I'm taking minutes, so I can record who's here.
Okay.
That works.
Great.
But I think we have a quorum, if that matters or whatnot. So we have majority people here.
2 out of 3.
Yeah.
Glad you're here, Esau.
I am glad you are here.
Thank you. All right, so we have our agenda, and if Erica can't join us at all, she'll see the minutes, JM, and you guys are saying there is a recording, so we can encourage her to take a look at this. Great. So the first item on the agenda is to say thank you to the Division of Economic Development for the memo. Hi, Erica.
Hi.
We're just proceeding, and we have to leave early. I think there's some background noise with your microphone, if you don't mind muting unless you're going to talk. Oh, great. Thank you. And Erica, we were just saying, we know you have to leave, but this is going to be recorded and there will be minutes. So hopefully we can all catch up again and be prepared for the next meeting. Thank you for being here, and we hope everything's okay at home. Okay, so the second agenda item is discussion with the Division of Economic Development. We wanted to thank the division for the memo, which I found very helpful, and it was really good to get a better understanding of what you guys are up to. In my mind, I don't know if Emily, as a representative of the Economic Development Committee, if you wanted to either summarize a memo or highlight anything for us, or if you weren't prepared to do that and we should just ask some questions and have a conversation.
I can answer any questions. I don't know if my summary would be all that great on the spot, but yeah, I can answer any questions that you might have. Okay, great.
I have some. Esau, I don't know if you have any. And I tell folks this all the time when I'm looking away, it's because I'm looking at my other screen. So I'm just looking at my questions over here. So I thought it was really helpful to get a bit better picture of what the Economic Development Division is doing. And I think it seems like you guys are committed to diversity, and you already have, numerous efforts happening. I guess, and Emily, you may not be in a position to answer this, but I was wondering if, based on what you guys have been doing so far, would you say that there's room for expansion and or improvement related to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts from the Economic Development Division? For example, through all the work that you've been doing, has it certain ideas bubbled to the top as like, oh, this is what we should do next, or if we had this sort of assistance or this sort of support, this would be a nice add-on to our efforts?
Yeah, I think that this team in general is very innovative. So ideas are always coming up. And I certainly don't think that like DEI efforts will ever be done and finished. So simple answer to your question, yes, I think that there's always more that can be done. And I think we would hope to get from you as well just ideas on other programs that we could be doing. Like you said, it's definitely been a concentrated effort. And I think, nationwide, a mentality shift, if that makes sense, to ensure that that's something that's being thought about in all of the programs that we're doing. So yes, I think that there's certainly more that could be done. I don't know if I necessarily have the answer, and that's something I think we're hoping to get from the task force, and whatever recommendations go to council and what council is looking for as well.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Since Erica's only here for a short period of time and I don't want to dominate, I have other questions, but Esau and Erica, I'm going to put myself on mute for a minute.
How about if you take the time that you have with us and share any of your comments before you have to go?
Sure. I appreciate the division working towards the diversity efforts. It's really important, especially to see this a city like Dublin doing that. It's important. We've got a lot of resources here in this community, and it's important that we're focusing efforts to help even down, in other cities that may need us. And so, and I don't know how that works either, but my question was, there was a part in the memo about opportunity for minority-owned businesses, vendors, contractors. Is there a specific criteria that you guys go by in terms of how you select minority-owned businesses or vendors, contractors, outside of them obviously being in the minority setting or title, if you will? What other specific criteria do you guys look at to decide, okay, we're going to work with this particular vendor or business-owned company?
Yeah, I can't speak for the other divisions. I think the memo mentions that a lot of vendors and subcontractors are done at a division level. There isn't, as far as I know, a formal policy surrounding it in the selection of vendors in building standards, and I can double check on that. But as far as I know, there is no formal policy on that. And the one that I mentioned, we used Borja Virtual Conferences and Events, and that was a happy, I don't want to say happy accident, but a happy conclusion that we came to with him, because he is a deck tenant, had the product that we were looking for, and we were putting on a minority focused event, and he is a minority owned business, so that was kind of a marrying of everything that we would be looking for.
Okay, good. Maybe we can follow up somehow. I'd just be interested to see what kind of criteria. You said there's no policy per se, but if there's other pieces or components of that, of how they decide who they're working with, I'd love to get a little bit more background. Emily, do you suggest, is there somebody to reach out specifically for that directly, or we just need to research on our own?
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
And Erica, I think there's really bad feedback from your speakers, but okay, that's great. We'll just go back and forth. That's a great question. We have been looking at this based on feedback from the previous meeting and other feedback that we've received of the city. The city manager's office, particularly Nick Plauk and Kirby Dirth, they have been looking at other communities with purchasing orders, whether it be for diversity, equity, inclusion lens or sustainability or both. And so far, we've found that King County in Washington, where Seattle is, has a very good purchasing order, administrative order for staff to follow. So we're beginning to look at that community and some other communities that we can glean the information and create another, or I guess an updated administrative order that speaks to green purchasing and also diversity, equity, inclusion lens when you're looking at vendors and some contractors. So that process is underway, but I can connect you with Nick Plauk and Kirby for a follow-up.
I was going to say, I think that research is being done. So thank you, JM.
Well, and is there anything you could post to MS Teams? Like, for example, I would imagine it would be helpful if us as the subcommittee took a look at maybe the King County purchasing approach, presuming we concur, which I expect we would, like it's something that we want to shoot for, then we could include in our recommendations, support for that effort for the Economic Development Office or the city to move in that direction.
Absolutely. I can post that administrative order from King County. And I would like to pose the question to the subcommittee. As staff comes across articles that speak to the purview and the scope of this subcommittee, would you want or expect us to post that to teams? And the intent is to provide you information, not to sway your opinions.
Absolutely. I would appreciate that.
Okay, then we'll do that with that intent in mind.
I also just would quickly clarify, I guess, that the AO, the administrative orders that JM's talking about would be citywide. It wouldn't necessarily be economic development's policy. It would be citywide. We don't really work with subcontractors on a daily basis. A lot of that's coming out of building standards or parks that are working with the contractors to build things. But it would be a citywide policy.
That's great. Thank you. Erica, was there anything else specific to the memo that before you take off that you wanted to mention or anything? Okay. One of the things that I thought that stood out to me was the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, DEC, which is obviously wonderful in so many ways. I'm not super familiar with it, but I have a general understanding of it. And it seems like perhaps maybe that is the basis from which there could be expansion of efforts to improve diversity among other groups of folks. I don't know if that's come up, if any of you have heard of that, or I guess I was under the impression, and maybe I'm wrong, that in general there's a large, broadly speaking, I don't know if the term's right, Asian population in Dublin, especially when it comes to businesses, both folks from India, Japan, China, etc. So I got the sense that the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center had a pretty strong base there, and of those folks from perhaps that nationality or those connections. And I think we really want to support that. And if there's ways that we can do that, the task force should come up with some recommendations. But in addition to that, I was wondering if that DEC actually is also a good place for intentional expansion to for example, Black-owned businesses or businesses with more minority, Latino, Black employees or something like that. I'm just bringing it up off the top of my head.
Because of my involvement with the Japan American Society of Central Ohio, or we call it JASCO, and JASCO's office being based there in that entrepreneurial center, which we've been calling the deck. I don't know if that's just us or if everybody does that. Okay, so I'll call it the deck. I do feel like there is a good diversity of people, not just in terms of racial, but obviously in different criteria. And I know they used to at least have some networking type of event where, within that center, people can get to know and encourage mutual growth. I don't know how much of that is still happening, or if there's actually anything official that incentivizes or that encourages creation of more diversity in that setting. But I definitely agree with you, Bridget, that that is something that I would love to at least take a look, and if at all possible, just encourage. Is Chaz Fertel still the guy that's running that? Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. And they do, ESAL, they are still doing the networking events, I believe, virtual, as all networking events are now. And they also put on, with the latest round of PPP, they put on a webinar helping people get connected to that, which I think are open to anybody who wants to join the webinar, but definitely for deck tenants.
And to add to that, if the subcommittee would like guest speakers such as someone from the deck, we can certainly help coordinate that for an upcoming meeting.
I'd love to hear from somebody from the deck who could, or maybe again, it doesn't have to be a memo, but a description of, and obviously I can go to their website and we can get more familiar with it, but perhaps they already have plans about like where they could see some growth in these areas, given as Emily was talking about, just the predominant focus on DEI issues now, which we hope is not short term. I wondered when I was reading the memo also, I really appreciate, because when I was doing research for our business, a few months ago, looking into these issues to help us with our business efforts related to DEI, because there's so much room for improvement. Partnering with groups, that are whose primary focus and purpose and mission is about representing that particular group, which we would call a diverse group. In the memo, there's a list of different partners that the Economic Development Office is partnering with. I think that is critically important, and I'm glad to see that the city is developing those partnerships. I'm wondering, I guess, if the city feels like they need any assistance to prioritize those relationships. Like, I guess I'm just thinking, like, I'm just imagining, well, there's limited staff with limited time. There's a relationship and they're partnering with a group, but there's maybe perhaps not the mandate to actually work with the group to do something more substantive rather than just agreeing on mission. I know this is a nebulous question.
I will tell you the question that I heard, and then you tell me if that's actually what you're asking. Are you saying, is there more opportunity to work with the referral resources that were listed? Is that kind of the question?
I like that approach, Emily. Let
Okay.
me figure out if I can see what you really meant. And I don't know what I really meant. So good for you for summing it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult with COVID, but Esau mentioned JASCO. That's a huge partner. We also work with AIABG and the Greater Columbus Chinese Chamber. And they do I want to say yearly events. I know AIABG's is a yearly event, and we attend those events when they can. And then just as far as the other stuff, those are more referrals to if a business says that they're looking for, like you mentioned, Bridget, more like diverse talent, trying to expand. I think you talked about that in the last meeting, trying to expand talent pool and stuff, reaching out to those groups as well. One thing that wasn't listed, because it's not like specific to DEI, but the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio is a huge partner, and they've also made a concentrated effort to work with diverse talent, as well as Perscolas, which is a tech classes. They teach classes on that. So we work with them as well to connect businesses who are looking for talent with the available pool in Central Ohio.
Is that Tony Cunningham's organization? Okay.
Yes, yes.
One thing I wondered if the subcommittee members concur, I assume you do. I believe that it's easy for us to, when we think about workforce development, to get maybe preoccupied with tech or something specific to the automotive industry. But I mean, I think one of the things we ideally won't neglect is the effort to recognize that we're looking for all sorts of diversity among varying levels of skill when we're talking about employees in Dublin. Like obviously, you know, professionals is that class is, I think, needed in Dublin, but I think there's also lower skilled or less skilled labor that we want to not forget, and also maybe figure out what some of the barriers are so that, for example, mobility, you know, trying to figure out if there is some way for Dublin to help promote access, whether it's through CODA, the bus system, or something. So I assume Esau and Erica, we sort of talked about that before. We don't want to forget that, right? And Erica, you know, what you were talking about before, which I agree with, you know, the idea of there's disenfranchised groups, maybe formerly incarcerated folks, you know, there's all types of diversity that we can be focused on that um, we can perhaps help employ folks if there's certain businesses in Dublin who have that need for that skill set, and then there's a program that's helping make the connection.
Yeah, I can. I don't know if JM's spoken about the shuttle programs, so I can let him speak on that if he hasn't. But as far as the other stuff that you talked about, I should have mentioned as well that we have relationships with Tolles and Columbus State and some of the technical skills and the vocational schools to work on that. I believe Sarah O'Malley in our office actually just made a connection with that recently, somebody looking for, I think it was welders. And so she made a connection to Tolles. So those are definitely, I should have talked about that, sorry. But those are definitely out there.
I will add to that in terms of mobility. Before COVID, we were looking at different opportunities that mobility could play. For example, we would go to businesses and say, hey, you know, we're here as a city of Dublin, here's our operator share for microtransit. Are there ways that we can get your workforce to sign up for riding the service? Another thing we did was when I think United Healthcare was having a job fair, we offered actually shuttling people from CODA bus stops to the job fair as a way to connect opportunity for those looking for jobs in Dublin and to raise awareness of the program. So there's other things like that that we're working on. I think after COVID is under control, we'd like to figure out other ways that we could either support job fairs or connect people to the service by raising more awareness. And just to add to that, I think I mentioned this before, but in terms of the equity lens, we did find out anecdotally through writers that some people that work in Dublin that take CODA service to our community were spending $200 to $400 a month in Uber and Lyft connections for last mile. So going back to what you said, Bridget, you know, this can have impacts spanning all sectors of the Dublin economy. And it's important to think about where the burden is and how we can alleviate it for equity purposes.
That's
fascinating information. I think that'll come in that'll become very relevant in our mobility type of discussion once we're done with the current topic, I think. Thank you for bringing that up. I had no idea.
I didn't either. JM, is there, you're saying you did some assessment so that you could come up with that fact that they're spending this amount of money. Is that something, a report or something you could share on MS Teams and we could take a look at that?
That was something that was communicated through our operator. So I can ask our operator if they have some of that documented somewhere. In the beginning of the service, we were able to get some ridership feedback. And once that's how we were able to get some of this data. So it's a couple years old, so I'll have to dig in to see if I can find more finite stuff.
It's fine. I mean, you don't have to do that. I just wondered if there just happened to be something easily accessible. But I
Right.
think it does speak to what we expect to be absolutely true,
I
which
mean,
is the barrier of just getting to Dublin on a bus. I mean, we're skipping that challenge, and then they're here, and then they need to try to get to their place of work where they might be paid a decent wage. The employer needs them. They want to keep their job, and it's just, between the time and the dollars going out for them to get to the final destination, it's just a shame.
it is, and it's important to note that our service is at no charge to the rider. So that's the big difference, I think, with alleviating some of the burden of transportation costs. And if you think about it, if you take Uber or Lyft, let's say $10 one way from your bus stop to the city, and that then back, that's $20 a day times 5 times 4. I mean, it really does begin to add up very quickly. So I think that's something that we want to think about and focus on moving forward.
Can you, before we move on, can you just, you said our service, is that the micro transit? I wasn't sure what program you're talking about.
You got it. And it's the microtransit service. We use Share as an operator, and we provide shuttle services for those aging in place as well as those with disabilities. And on the other side of that coin of microtransit is the workforce. And that's where we pick up individuals from CODA bus stops in and around Dublin. So it either can be the park and ride at Bridge Park, or it can be the carriage place at Solomon and Bethel. That's a big transfer point, as well as Tuttle Mall. And that's how we funnel workers up to our community. So that's the service I'm referring to. We are looking at 4 other areas of mobility, but I think microtransit will have the biggest dent in terms of equity and inclusion.
Is there a description of that program that I've missed on MS Teams, or can you share that?
I can certainly share that, yes.
Okay.
And I'm happy to provide a presentation at a future meeting that we can dive a little bit deeper into the data.
That would be great. Now, Bridget, I have a question or two, but I think the more and more I look at what I jotted down before and during the meeting, they may be more of comments or suggestions type of things as opposed to a simple question. Do you want me to go there first, go there now, or wait until later? I do have a question, but other than that, those others tend to be more of a comment.
I think we're flexible, and I'm pretty close to done. The next agenda items, which we can sort of mix into two, was just whether we had any research we wanted to share with each other and development of any recommendations or initial recommendations. So I think whatever you want to bring up now is a great time.
Okay, well, just a quick question, Emily, with regards to all the resources that are already there and all the effort already been made by the economic development. I echo what's already been said. We're very appreciative and I think proud of what Dublin has already done. I did think to what Bridget was saying, both with us and perhaps in open meeting settings, about her company's effort to dive deeper into DEI in her employment or in her workforce, and her doing a research on her own in order to figure out the resources, which made me think whether enough people are aware of what the city has already done or what it already has available. To the extent that are you or is the city tracking what kind of uptake you have on those resources, how often those are being utilized or how often you get questions? In other words, how much difference are those resources or researches that you have already done actually making?
It's a good question. No, most of these resources are being shared, and we have a monthly development update, and they go out in that email. And then after they're out, we don't track, we really have no way of tracking whether people are utilizing them. We do know the number of Dublin companies that are certified with the MBE certification, which is a Minority Business Enterprise, I believe. And that's a statewide program. So we just from public records are aware of how many are certified in that, but have no way really of knowing if they participated in that program because we shared it, or if that was something that they came across on their own.
Okay. No, I am certainly aware and appreciative of the fact that the bottom line that the economic development is looking for is new employers, additional employment, and increased tax revenue, vibrant growth as a whole. But I think for this DEI effort to really take root in Dublin, and for people to notice that Dublin is truly different versus maybe some of the other communities in Central Ohio, I feel like it needs to be more front and center. It needs to be more explicitly stated that Dublin welcomes those employers, or Dublin welcomes employers who want more of that, even if they don't have it. And that the city is not shy about providing those opportunities or resources. In fact, the city would like to encourage everybody to take up those opportunities. If you, and I don't know if I'd call it research, but I did take a look through the economic development website. I don't think I saw anything that was particularly eye-catching about DEI effort. And that can be said about the city as well. Going back to the earlier comment in this meeting, any kind of a policy such as that would be at a citywide level versus economic development level. And I think this definitely should be a recommendation at the whole task force level. But if the city is making that commitment, and to me it has, because that's why we are here, and that's why we're tasked to push the city, I think it needs to be more visible. It needs to be more eye-catching. And hopefully, there is going to be an effort behind it to also track how much difference that is making. Because I think if Dublin, for example, the FitBiz, I think that's what that effort's called, right? If Dublin's putting that kind of resource behind it and has a drop-down menu that says FitBiz, my guess is that there's a little bit more tracking going on about the usage of that service, and perhaps going deeper into what kind of wellness trend we might be able to discern within the city of Dublin and employment or employers within Dublin. I think that's a great role model or a great example. And I appreciate Bridget bringing that up, because I had not made that connection that it could be something like that.
Yeah, I think, Isa, I mean, we've talked about it, the FitBiz, I think, program, and I only happen to know because at Roto, our place of business, that program has reached out to us on a regular basis. We signed up for their emails. We met with their staff to see if there were wellness goals that we might have, that they had resources that they could help us with, do a little customization if necessary, offer research and resources. So I think as we talked, Isa, or in our email exchange, I think it makes sense that there's a whole fitness center. So there's obviously staff in the city already dedicated to wellness. And I think it's probably relatively easy for the city to justify dedicating some staff time to working with businesses in the Dublin area who want to improve wellness. But I do think it is definitely a model worth considering for promotion of DEI. It does take money and staff, but it could be as simple as a combination of sort of a single stop shop website that, like Esau said, needs to be perhaps more promoted among folks, but also more easily visible on the website. Maybe it's not in economic development, but it's in my mind right now, I'm imagining it as a single stop shop where the research I was doing before, I might have gone to that and I would have found out, how to link to both the city of Columbus and the state of Ohio minority and women-owned business databases, which can be very valuable. Lots of the groups that the Economic Development Office is already partnering with, all their links on that website, for example. And then also, I mean, there's so much room here for adding on depth and breadth. But the other thing that this would be doing is offering to businesses that are interested either in coming to Dublin or already in Dublin, if they want to figure out how do we do better on DEI, and we know DEI is a broad topic, so it might not just be one meeting between the Dublin staff and the company that's interested. It might be more like, a couple phone calls and one or two meetings where there's a customized effort to help them to make progress, literal progress, not just talking about this stuff, but doing better on hiring, doing better on diversity of the subcontractors or the freelancers they're working with, doing better on retention of a diverse workforce, doing better on making sure the lower socioeconomic employees actually can get to work without spending, a third of their daily pay on Uber, for example. So I think there's a lot of potential, and I guess that's going to be one of my main recommendations to our subcommittee that I hope makes it to the task force, some version of this approach.
Yeah, I would also, with the FitBiz thing, just to clarify a little bit, that is obviously internal staff that's doing that. A lot of, I think, if I'm understanding right, what you would be looking for with the DEI stuff, we would be making recommendations on people to connect them with, not necessarily sending, like we wouldn't have the staff to send in and help people with their workforce, but we can definitely make the references to the, there's also I believe it's a private company, Level D&I, who their model is helping companies increase, and exactly what you were saying, Bridget, with the infrastructure to support these people that they're bringing in. So making those referrals, and I think to your point, Esau, that could have some follow-up as well to see whether that's working out well. But I don't know, like FitBiz, I think is a good model, but that is rec staff that's going in to do that, and I don't know if any city staff would be going in to address these issues with the companies, but certainly making recommendations on who they could talk to, and people that would be probably better experts on the subject.
No, I think in the world, the city will do that. But I think we all recognize that we don't live in the world, and that is a city resource that is funded by taxpayer that we have to be very wise about. So in real life, I think whether it's an internal staff or maybe an outside quote unquote consultant who would do something like that, I think is importance needs to be placed on how visible is the city's commitment, and how is the city to complete that commitment. Visibility matters. Making a clear stance statement matters.
Yeah, Esau, I think you and I are on the same page here where there is well, first of all, our recommendations can be whatever we decide they are and the task force approves, even if they're perhaps more ambitious than what we might think the city would adopt. I don't think we should not be ambitious in what we think would be ideal for the city. And I do think that there's room to suggest that depending on the depth of the commitment, there's probably a person who should be funded to be promoting DEI in all ways for the city. I mean, that might actually be a recommendation. We need to flesh out and think about that. But I'm not suggesting, Emily, that the city would have all the expertise related to these issues, but I do think there's probably a call for dedicated staff that develops all the connections, knows a lot of the information, and is supported by the city to not just promote what's happening, but to help companies get specific outcomes related to these goals. So we'll have to think about a recommendation on that.
Yeah, and I just want to, sorry, I apologize if it seemed like I was trying to be a barrier or anything like that. I certainly did not mean to do that, and I definitely, we will take the recommendations that the task force puts forward. Yeah, I definitely just wanted to clarify. I was not trying to be a barrier. I just wanted to level set on what FitBiz is specifically, and give that kind of context to it. So apologies for that.
No, I appreciate that. It totally makes sense. And our role, we're trying to figure out our own role. And I realize that this is the opportunity to be a little bit, maybe even a lot more ambitious. And I think there's a long-term component to this. There's the likelihood that perhaps this is trending now, and hopefully it'll last, but part of making it last is making substantive changes in the city. And this would be part of it.
Agreed. No apologies necessary, none at all. Bridget, I think you might have muted yourself there.
Thank you. I wondered if we could let Emily go. Esau, I don't know if, so on the agenda, we have development of draft recommendations. I feel like we're sort of in the middle of that now. And then we have assignment of tasks and likely agenda items for later. Was there anything else that we felt, or that you had for Emily? I don't.
Nothing that we have to take up her time or economic development time right now. I think anything that needs to be communicated will find its way onto the recommendations.
And just so everyone knows, the subcommittee members know, we invited Emily to be a semi-permanent member of this subcommittee, given the scope of economics being in the title. So Emily, you are free to go, but she will be joining us maybe in every future meeting moving forward.
Oh, that's great.
So you know.
I can stick around today. I'm happy to stick around.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. Esau, did you have anything else? This is our chance to do subcommittee business, right now, in a public setting.
Correct.
I feel like, and we have emailed before about, trying to hone in on some recommendations sooner rather than later, because we know that this subcommittee technically will want to jump into some other topics like housing eventually. Did you have anything? I feel like there's at least two recommendations we're going to end up fleshing out. One being this, for ease of use, I'm just going to say some DEI promotion modeled in some way after the FitBiz approach. And then the second one I feel like is we're realizing there might need to be some dedicated staff related to this topic for the city to be most effective on. Are there any other recommendations that have bubbled up for you so far that you'd want to talk about?
So maybe in your mind, this is already a part of one of those two, if not both, but again, more of a public statement that is visible, that this is a priority for the city. Again, I recognize that it might be more of a citywide recommendation as opposed to just economic development.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think, to further encourage people that are interested, that are wanting to and willing to do the right thing or make improvements in their environment, but maybe are just not sure, because I recognize that this is an uncomfortable conversation for many. And I think oftentimes people are afraid of speaking up and saying something wrong or having something come out in the wrong way. I think maybe like-minded businesses getting together to share their experiences, or some kind of a focus group, maybe that's the term I'm looking for, that allows people to pick each other's brain, maybe somebody from the city or a resource that the city would provide from the outside that's a facilitator to encourage these people to keep making improvements. I think that would be a worthy conversation. And I don't know, maybe I'm pushing this a little bit too far, but some kind of a public recognition of businesses or employers that are either going over and beyond what most would call it normal, to make progress in this DEI area. Or if we can take it even further, some kind of, this is going to come out wrong. I mean, I'll say that first. This is not the term I'm looking for, but some kind of a top of the scoreboard kind of a list of these are the companies, employers that are doing great in this effort to make progress. And I haven't even thought about how you would measure that. But maybe I can just sum it up all in public recognition of efforts being made by employers. Because I think, from time to time, we do spotlight and feature this employer doing this in this area or that area. I don't know that it has ever been done in the DEI area. And last but not least, I think if we hope to actually increase diversity and equity and all of that in this economic development field, my belief is that proactive, intentional outreach to certain employers that would fit that profile, that would fit those categories, will be needed. In other words, if it is more of a, here we are and this is Dublin, and wait for people to come to us, no matter what we do, we're not going to make the kind of progress that we're looking for, or it's just not going to be made as quickly as we would like. So to the extent that it's possible, I would like to encourage more of a pointed outreach, intentional picking off of potential employers that Dublin would love to have expand into Dublin in the area of DEI, or at least some employers that would add not just the business, but also in the area of DEI.
Great. That's awesome. How do you, are you comfortable, can I make a recommendation thinking about assignment of tasks that, and this, obviously I wouldn't just recommend it to you, I'll be doing it as well, and we'll reach out to Erica, but how do you think you're in a position to flesh out? I have those, to me, that was 4 recommendations that you just made for at least for the subcommittee to think about. Can you flesh those out a little bit more in writing? And then I guess I would ask JM, are we allowed to do an exchange on email of whatever we would flesh out in anticipation of then talking about them and sharing them as part of the agenda at the next meeting?
That's a good question. I think there's a fine line just to be cognizant of. You can certainly share information, but you can't discuss or come to a resolution or agreement based on the information. So as long as it's information sharing, I think that's okay.
So how, JM, do you happen to know, like if we think we're going to have a series of recommendations and we want to make sure that the 3 of us on the subcommittee have seen them before our next meeting so that we can then actually discuss them, how do we share them with each other and the public? Is that like an addendum to the agenda then? or, draft recommendations. I'm not sure how that works.
I think I'd suggest if you want to funnel everything to me or the staff, we can put it all together in a document and we can send it out as an item to discuss at the next meeting. So it can be like a draft, if you will.
Isa, what do you think of, is that doable given your schedule and all for us to draft up some stuff and share it with them?
Definitely. Yeah.
Great.
I can share that with the minutes of this meeting, so you have both for review for the next meeting.
Okay.
And speaking of which, we need to also approve the December minutes before we end today.
Oh, I meant to do that. Yeah, and we have a quorum. So can I move? I move to approve the December subcommittee meeting minutes.
And I second.
And all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great.
That's
Thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
I know we also probably need to end soon. Let's see. Since we don't have Erica. So likely agenda items for the next meeting, I think, JM, it's definitely going to be some review and talk about whatever draft recommendations we end up sharing with you in the next week or two. We'll put that on the agenda, and I can, give you a more specific agenda. Is there something else, Esau, besides the obvious stuff that would be on the next agenda? Do we want to talk to anybody from DEC or anybody else?
I almost forgot that we even talked about that earlier today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to have somebody share what's going on in DEC for 10, 15 minutes.
I agree. DEC, I'm going to get with it. Could we have a representative from DEC who can give us a sense of what they do, but also maybe he's able to speak to what they'd like to be able to do when it comes to DEI?
I think we can help. Emily and I can work with economic development and make that happen. What I would ask the subcommittee to do is let's finalize the meeting schedule for this subcommittee, and then that will help us with scheduling the guest speaker. But I think it's a good opportunity just to get that out of the way. So what I could suggest is you could either Miss Adams isn't here today, but I know that we've talked about this before, so we could either continue with a Thursday meeting schedule, or we can do a Tuesday. I think we went back and forth with that so far. Maybe I can send an email to the subcommittees and just confirm if that would be appropriate.
Esau, does Tuesday and Thursday mornings work for you generally or not?
Generally, correct. And it does kind of depend on whether I have client meetings already scheduled, but in general, morning times should be good.
Me too. So, JM, do you want us to reach out to Erica and just try to maybe confirm with her what might work best? I think she has the most restraints in regards to her business work schedule. And then I can get back to you.
That'd be great. Just confirming the day of the month, if it's the 3rd or the last Tuesday, the last Thursday of the month, and then also the time if there's a preference. So if 9:30 to 10:30 works, that's great. If we need to adjust, we will.
And I just, for the record, want to point out, at least in my estimation, JM, and the staff may want to know, Esau, correct me if you think I'm misrepresenting this, but I feel like the current subcommittee focus, we are trying to get the recommendations done in the next month or two, because we think that there is going to be a second or third focus on housing or mobility. And I don't know if all three of us will still be engaged or if there might be other additions, and that might change the schedule when we're talking about April, May, and June.
I think that's a fair assessment.
That is, and I would like to add, we have been talking internally about documents to help provide structure to the community task force. So right now we found a document from Beaverton, Oregon, I want to say. They do a great job of providing a framework for DEI efforts. So I can share that document with this group. But what I guess my point is, we're looking to mimic a similar framework or structure. And I think there's opportunity to include recommendations for housing, mobility, and workforce. So just to give you a little preview.
Is that something that'll be on MS Teams?
I'll post it for sure.
And I guess I would say we can try to look pretty regularly on MS Teams, but if you've just posted a few things, then maybe send out an email just alerting us to take a look.
Absolutely. And we will follow your guidance on posting articles that pertain to what we're talking about for information purposes.
Okay. Is there any other business or points, Esau, that you'd like to make or that I forgot?
None from me.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for today's time and effort, and for the minutes that are going to be shared. And I'll get back to folks after talking to Erica, and we'll also draft an agenda sooner rather than later.
Do we have a motion to adjourn then?
Oh, yeah. No.
So moved.
Well, who's putting forward the motion? I can't do it.
I move to adjourn.
Then I second.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.